Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar today. We're going to be talking about cookies, and what a time to be talking about cookies, which are in the news in the past 24 hours. Google has obviously begun the much delayed process of eliminating third-party cookies from its Chrome browser, though news emerged last night that the deadline has been pushed from the end of 2024 to 2025. Despite the delay, since Chrome has such an enormous share of the global browser marketplace, this is a substantial change for the advertising industry to adapt to. Yet, from research that we've seen, only half of marketers are prepared for the removal of third-party cookies. That's according to a recent report from WARC. So in today's webinar, we'll dive into how marketers can navigate this targeting, measurement, and attribution shift with actionable insights from a panel of digital experts. Specifically, we're going to address how cookie cutting is impacting audience strategies, technology stacks, and workforce design. I'm Jessica Heygate. I'm the technology editor of Campaign US. I've been covering this topic for a while, and joining me are three amazing panelists. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, starting with Kat.
Hi, Jess. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here to talk about this topic that has been talked about a million times, but hopefully, again, we'll be able to make it interesting, as it is certainly one that's not going away. So I am currently at ADT, the security company, and I lead our e-commerce and digital experience team. And so we work very closely with our advanced analytics team and our media team on this topic. So can share more about that, kind of what it looks like from a skill set and planning perspective. And then prior to that was at the WPP, or a WPP Center of Excellence on First Party Data and CRM in Europe, which was intentional on my part, because I thought, if you're going to learn about this topic, you should go where GDPR is the hottest. And live and in place. And so spent a couple of years there with that team before I landed here.
Amazing. Perfect. And next up is Lauren-Nicole.
Hello, equally as excited to be here. My name is Lauren-Nicole. I'm a digital marketing manager with DispatchHealth, where I handle the day-to-day execution of our paid media campaigns, which inherently has forced us to look at how we are transitioning from our programs so that they are less cookie reliant.
Amazing. And last but certainly not least, joining us is Mike.
Hello. Hey, Jess. Great to be here. Definitely excited to talk about the topic today. I'm Mike Coppola, president of Amsive. We are a performance marketing agency. We work with a lot of challenger brands to mid-size and enterprise clients across a variety of industries, both regulated and unregulated industries. So got a lot to share of what we kind of see across our clients, the industry, and we at Amsive have sort of taken a very audience-centric approach to performance marketing, which has been real successful for us and some of our clients to kind of navigate in this sort of post-cookie measurement and performance marketing landscape. So excited to be here.
Amazing. We've got a lot of ground to cover today, but I think it would be really helpful if we can set the scene a little bit. So Kat and Lauren-Nicole, what I'm interested in is where your companies are currently at in their journey to evolve away from third-party cookies, which have played a fairly important role in the marketing mix historically. How has the progress been for your companies, and when did that journey kind of begin in earnest?
Yeah, so I've been with DispatchHealth about 2 years now. And when I had that interview for the company, I actually brought the question, how is Dispatch preparing to navigate this new landscape? Even back then, we were already using first-party cookies and metadata in order to capture that first-party data. However, moving forward and since then, it was probably July or August of last year that one of our vendors, Amsive, actually came to us and said, here's our solution to cookieless advertising. And that really sparked internally that deeper discussion of what this new solution looked like and how it was compliant with the programs that we were wanting to continue working on. That launched in Q4 of last year. So today with Amsive, our campaigns are 100% cookieless, and I'd say that's about 98 to 99% of our overall awareness media.
The thing about being a 150-year-old company is that we designed a bunch of motions when there weren't cookies. So maybe the upside of that is that we have traditionally relied a lot on first-party data through like web forms and lead capture that way. And so I would say what we're focused on now is getting our CDP, kind of some of that, enterprise ID. How is all that data connected and then flowing in ways that we can use back into media, back into other formats, to kind of be more effective as we're reaching those customers. And I think we're thinking about new ways that we have a traditional definition of a lead. And how are we thinking about other ways, other than, again, kind of that web form that you all imagine that says, give us your email and some other information. What are you looking for? And then we'll call you. We still do a lot of that. Customers still engage with us that way quite heavily. But what are other data points that we can ask for from customers that allow us to reach back out to them with the right kind of value exchange in mind? So I think that's really the forward look for us is, how does that evolve in a way that still gets the customer the information they need on their terms?
Yeah, perfect. And we are going to definitely drill down a little bit more into the first party data side of things. Before we get into that, I just want to remind the audience that's listening that you can ask questions at any time through the Q&A box, and we'll get to them as and when they come up. So yeah, if any questions that you have for any of our panelists, do encourage you to submit those. But Mike, I'm going to come to you because this change, as we've talked about, has been a long time coming. Yes, it has been delayed again. But despite the fact that we've had several years to prepare for this, research suggests that marketers are just still not ready. So I'm wondering what you're noticing in terms of the levels of readiness amongst your clients. Obviously, we've got a client here with us who's talked about the fact that they're pretty ready, but what are you seeing in general?
Yeah. I think the data point is about 50% of marketers, and as you can imagine, it's a mix. It's a mix, really across all types of clients. And when you look for like, okay, what might be some similar factors for those clients that are ready or aren't ready, it's I'd say the thing that I can draw to mostly is that the industries and clients that have been focused very heavily on managing really good customer data, right, in a organized, meaningful way where they're using that data historically. So a lot of regulated industries like banks, healthcare companies, they're maybe struggling with the enablement of some of the newer technologies, but they have the foundations in place to do really well in this sort of post-cookie environment. So, I'd say it's a mix, from what we're seeing in terms of readiness. I think it's also been a really good time for marketers to actually become marketers again, start talking about the things that really matter, right? Which is, who am I actually marketing to with purpose, right? So the focus is more on structuring your own first party data. And we see a mix of maturity, not just based on the size of the company, right? But really of where they are in that journey to kind of own, store, manage that data effectively, to then be able to start to activate in ways that are powerful in a post-cookie environment. So, I'd say it's been a mix, but it's also been a little bit of a refreshing time because it's back to being marketers. Like, who are we marketing to? I need to understand more about who they are, how to segment that data better, right? And then what is my core message, and is that message resonating against audiences? So, in terms of different technology platforms, it's also a mix, and clients are kind of taking stock in that today, in what their tool chest is. So.
Did you, as a quick follow-up, did you expect the deadline to get pushed again? I know there's been varying opinions in the run-up about whether this is going to happen by the end of 24 or not.
Yeah, every day I see the sun come up. I know it's still there, and I also expect that Google's going to delay that again. And it's I know they talked about the regulators being part of that decision, but I think a lot is just I think clients are ready. I think those that have moved on have realized how really flawed the whole system was, right? We were kind of marketing to a continually smaller population, and we're over relying on a measurement tactic for digital that doesn't give us great insights into the who. So I think it's a little bit more the industry. There's a lot of advertising that's running, still dependent on cookies, and there's a lot at risk. So it didn't surprise me at all. Like the sun is still going to come up. We're going to delay it, but it doesn't really stop, right? The progress and the motivation I see any of the clients that are trying to activate this do. Like
Yeah.
this really is like a non-event in terms of the event.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw this out to the group, to whoever feels inspired to answer, but I'm interested in, how the deprecation of third-party cookies is impacting how you're thinking about your audience strategy more broadly. For example, and this obviously all of the solutions are very varied and it's complicated, but are you prioritizing more of a kind of contextual cohort-based style marketing now, or building your first-party data to kind of continue to fuel that more personalized one-to-one marketing? Like, how are you thinking about the way you want to market in the future and the tools that you need in order to do that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think we're certainly, like I said, because of our history as a company and the way we've traditionally connected with customers, we're starting and just making sure our first party data that we're, again, giving more ways to interact. So that's basic stuff on the website, like abandoned cart, save cart, kind of the ability to go back to that. So very simple things, as well as just, other ways to engage in kind of quizzes and things that allow us to just, learn more about them, but give them a lot of different ways to kind of engage with the product and hopefully get something meaningful in return. But when I was in my last gig, I think it's really exciting actually to see how the contextual stuff is coming out. In terms of, like you said, Mike, makes you think as a marketer again, because I was working with a client there, we were at WPP, but thinking about kind of, mapping the planet in these ways where you can start to understand, what's the audience look like by, geo and demo, but then also what's your penetration there? Are there events that are happening, whether that's a baseball game or something else? And so I think for us, we think about, certainly there's a lot of data that's contextual around movers, which is a big audience for us, but also we have access to a number of kind of crime reports, crime data. And so thinking about how do we use that in a way that, again, isn't fear mongering, but is helpful to our customers, and that's both physically and then offline. So we have, a large kind of field presence. And then events. We've been thinking about the Spanish speaking audience. How do we engage with them? So then we can think about specific events in specific cities, San Antonio, et cetera, is like one that we're kind of exploring. And so I think the contextual piece is actually really interesting, and should, if we do it right, I think how we scale it and how we that's kind of the question. But I think it also is for us unlocking some kind of new creative spaces. So I think it's both. It's certainly the first party and zero party data, kind of how are we capturing a lot more when they come to us. But then I also get concerned sometimes about first party building too much off our first party data, because then we'll get what we've got in terms of customer segments. It can be a bit reductive if we're not careful. And so I think the contextual opportunity, allows us to keep kind of broadening the aperture of the type of customers that we might want to reach out to in different ways. So I think those two are nice complements to each other.
We are definitely investing in our patient profiles, our patient models that are based off of that first party data that we can then, augment with either second party partner data or third party aggregators if needed. And then while that's going on, we are also investing in our CDP, standing that up. And similar to what you said, we're also looking at how do we get that data earlier in our funnel. We're in a really unique space with healthcare, because anecdotally, someone needs to go to the urgent care or a hospital maybe once every 3 years. And we don't have the ability to give discounts or promotions on the visits that we provide. and we don't really gatekeep any of our content. So how do we then get individuals to engage with us and give us that, first party data with consent to market earlier? And for us, that might look like account creation. The benefit to the partner or the patient is that, hey, when you are sick, you get a quicker checkout because all your information is there. And in the meantime, while you're healthy, we're getting to communicate with you, whether it's online, whether it's email marketing, to help make sure that you feel comfortable to use us when that time comes.
Yeah, and I'd say, definitely echo the efforts to kind of build that zero and first party data platform to be able to then personalize a little bit more of that messaging. But I think it's a combination. We do a lot of audience centric work, so we're doing a lot of predictive models across our client portfolios that are forcing us to really be purposeful about who we targeting, right? Versus, sort of a black box where you maybe aren't really knowing, okay, who's in that audience that's being built, right? Off of a third party publisher. Like, we're controlling that now. We're being purposeful. We're building predictive models, really segmenting audience strategies, tapping into third party data and intent data has been really successful to kind of then overlay against those modeled audiences. And that seems to be the strategy that's working best. And, there's some good, doing contextual in the right way. Also, forces you to think about your adjacency to your message and how to customize that in a way that's value add that we see real strong pull-through rates and engagement rates from those types of campaigns. I'll bet there is some scale issues for some of them, because if you're doing it really well, right, you got to be really mindful of what is that content and where that lives, and some of that starts moving us into non-programmatic buys to make that even more relevant and meaningful. So I'd say, like most things, it's a mix. But at the end of all of it is making sure there's a good rigor when you think about these new strategies that we're enabling to actually test and learn your way through those results, right? To make sure that we're ultimately looking at everything against customer acquisition data, and I think that's been helpful, right? Measure it against what we ultimately get. Right. And looking at core sort of measurement strategies like incrementality and the media mix are really helpful in kind of navigating some of the new solutions that are out there right now.
Yeah, media mix modeling back in fashion.
Yeah.
We have a couple of questions that have come through before I dig a bit further into the data side of things. So I'm just going to run through a couple of these. I think one of the questions was about, Kat, what you're investing in. I think you had mentioned a CDP. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. That's that one. Another question that we got through was, what is your plan for awareness targeting using paid media if third-party data audiences aren't available?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike.
I talk days on that one. So, but yeah, it's if the third party data isn't available, core contextual, right, adjacency to really good content that has high intent is really an evergreen strategy that is available in all publishers and formats, right? They might coin it differently, from a product name, but that's a really great place to start. But then also just uploading, right, your custom audiences that you have. Like, we see a lot of, when we get newer clients coming in, you almost get shocked at some of the core tactics of, like, are we segmenting out our latent users or our lapsed customers, or even segmenting our existing customers into high value customers. Those are all custom audiences that we can control for cross-sell, for prospecting, it's building lookalikes off of those audiences, and predictive models that are really, really helpful for that.
Kat, I don't know if you had anything further to add, or if that kind of answered.
No, I was going to say summed it up nicely.
Nice.
As well.
Mike, to be honest, this might be another one for you since you've been talking about predictive modeling, but the question that we have is, are there any predictive modeling tools you would recommend if you don't have the resources to build your own internally?
Yeah, there's a couple of tools, and it seems like every day there's sort of a new sort of modeling tool that's coming out. But what you're going to see is a lot of the CDPs are providing some modeling uh, capabilities, like within platforms. So that's becoming almost commonplace right now. Um, so I'd start looking at the existing tech stack that you have, which brings up a whole other topic. Is I we're racing towards other technology, but like taking stock in what we actually have today in our organizations, I find there's always opportunity. So most CDPs, if not now, or it's just when, will have some type of modeling capability for that. And then there's some out of the box sort of platforms. One Speedion comes to mind, where you can kind of upload audience data, and you'll pay for that privilege, but relatively approachable.
Awesome. Yeah, we are gonna dial a bit more into the technology stack and using what you already have, as opposed to just purely investing in what's new. The audience is very engaged in predictive modeling. So, final question on this before we move on. But one person has asked, what are your thoughts on creating these models based on de-identified health data?
I could answer. So it's important, right? You have to understand the policies and what's to be compliant building models. Like, what is the sources of data that you're using if it's not your own data? So um, so you can do a lot of things by just purposely using um, just unique identifiers that are connected to universal IDs, right? That do not pass through any PII, to be able to push these models out in a compliant, safe way to all platforms. The last thing you want to do is upload any sort of PII data. Some publishers will reject that, others won't. But I think it's important that you have a safe place to do that, like a clean room, to kind of extract any of that PII data. So then you're just grabbing sort of an anonymized ID that can be used to kind of build out and push audiences across platforms. If I'm answering the question the right way.
Exactly. And I think the only thing to add to that as well is, when we have that first party data ourselves, we can take a look at what are the factors that make someone have the right mindset to utilize our service, regardless of whether or not that PHI is involved. So we don't need to know what conditions they necessarily have, but we can take a look at what is going on, random things like, do they own Jeeps? Does that make them more likely to use our services? The distance to a Kroger, for some reason, that might influence it. So there's a ton of other, with your first party data, there's a ton of other data points that you can look at that say, hey, this person has the right mindset, again, the propensity to then utilize our healthcare services. And then, exactly to Mike's point, that's then where you want to use a clean room. Once you have that audience and you feel like you understand that profile and where you can apply it, that's when you want to make sure that you're completely compliant with getting that audience loaded and actually running the media to them.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, thank you for the great questions. I have a question myself about first party data, because Kat, you kind of alluded to this earlier, but there is a lot of data that's collected. Not necessarily all of it is being used. So I'm really interested in how you evaluate your data practices to ensure you're only really collecting what you need, whether this has caused a shift in your strategy at all, where you're saying, well, why actually are we collecting this data? What's the purpose of it?
Mm-hmm. think step one in some ways is related to the like having an enterprise level ID where all that is stitched together, so you know what you have actually asked for and collected on that customer. So I would say we're again, as a we've got a lot of legacy kind of products and systems, and so as we're stitching that together, I think we're learning more and more about what is the data that's most useful to us and the customer kind of in that relationship. This is veering into kind of the staffing question, but and we're hiring. So check out ADT, because we've got 2 kind of end-to-end lifecycle roles open right now. Shameless plug. But one of them is really someone whose job is to think about strategy in terms of the journey and what I always call kind of like the give-get, like what is that value exchange between you and the customer? Because, I think that has to live tightly in line with what is our data strategy holistically, from unknown to known to then, kind of retention. And so it may seem like kind of a big esoteric answer, but I think it's really critical for us in that as we're trying to certainly be prepared for cookieless, but also just do better by our customers day in, day out, is that sense of creatively and from a content standpoint, what is it that we would like to know so we can better serve them? And then what can we give them in exchange for that? What's the timing on it? Like how tight does that have to be? How does that change by segment? We have lots of models. We have a large existing customer base that we've had, many of them for 7 years on average, if not much longer. So we have lots of data we can use for modeling, which is great. But that, we still want to then kind of get into, okay, but that give-get exchange, and then make sure that's underpinned by a data strategy that is only as good as its ability to then activate across our channels. Mm-hmm. So again, sounds like big kind of vague answers, but also the kinds of things that we're grappling with of, we have to know how all those things are going to hang together so that the very next question we ask the customer has a lot of intent behind it. Because, especially for us in a category, health is very similar, right? Like we're in a category that's very emotional and rational for our customers. And so we try to be very, very thoughtful about how we handle each one of those interactions with them. So again, big, broad answer, not sure if that helps at all, but that is where my brain goes when asked that kind of very specific question.
Yeah, and I think part of this stitching together that you talk about, understanding what it is that you have, is also understanding, the technology stack that you have and how all of that is speaking to each other. And so it would be good if we can talk about that, how you have gone about as companies evaluating what you currently have, how the systems are communicating. Are you using the technology stacks to their full capability, and what outcomes you've kind of come to as a part of that process?
Maybe I'll just pick that one up as a continuation, is that we're certainly like I said, the CDP, but I was chatting with a friend recently who's at a CDP provider. And we were talking about the fact that they spend like 50% of their development resources on actually making sure the data moves, so APIs and what is the kind of structured way to move the data around. So I think we are on Salesforce Marketing and Commerce Cloud. So we're not making any changes there. We have AEM as kind of our CMS, so to speak. So we're not making any changes there. I think, like Mike said, we know our utilization of those tools is lower than it should be. Like there's a lot more we could get out of them. And then we're investing in the CDP to make sure we're getting those kind of robust attributes. But then I think a lot of the nitty gritty of the architecture is really going to come down to the APIs and how's that data flowing, certainly in line with consent, and making sure that PII is only in the right places, as Lauren-Nicole was mentioning. But so I think that's where we are, is just like digging in on is the plumbing all in place, and if not, how are we going to get there?
Yeah, we often come across like there's also the reality is there's a lot of legacy systems, whether it's ERPs that are entrenched in organizations for years that might not even have the fundamental ability to manage an API call. So there's a lot of development that then needs to happen to be able to enable the stitching, between systems. It's almost an advantage being like a newer challenger brand where you can kind of, start your landscape today and be kind of purposeful It's not easy for organizations to kind of make those technology changes. And the reality is data for most clients is living in many different places, right? And it's not necessarily enriched. Um, you get a lot of different answers. I find, being on the agency side, before engagement versus after engagement. If anybody's from an agency, they would probably chuckle at that. Like, yeah, we have everything all together, and then you kind of realize, wait, there's an entire project here to just try and help navigate and stitch, and often there's an enablement challenge, of various clients that have to be filled either through partnerships like ours or through other consultancies that can come in, or an emerging hire role internally. So yeah, it's not easy to pull it all together, to be able to start activating in a meaningful way. Yeah.
So we are in the process of standing up our CDP. So, to Mike's point, there's a lot of development that needs to take place there. Sorry, Michael. There's a lot of development then that needs to take place there. But it does give us that opportunity to look at where is the data today and what are those stitching points that need to happen, so that we fully understand where we are now, so that as we're building that CDP and we know what our ultimate outcome and what we want that to be, we can make sure that we're building that architecture from the very beginning based off of what we currently have today.
Talk about alignment is really, really important internally, right? In terms of getting the alignment across the organization, from from IT to marketing to compliance and legal. There's a lot of education that has to happen for that, and some organizations are equipped to do that. And I see that as the number one sort of stumbling block, has usually been the education part before we even get into the implementation. And there's just a sea of different technologies and players out there, and many different CDP partners, and it can become hard to kind of navigate those waters, right? Particularly when there's a learning curve going on internally within a client org. So, curious if you guys have any thoughts on that, and prior or past experiences of I call it finding your key advocate, right? It's got to kind of create these sort of advocacy groups in the organization to kind of move that change forward, or it's very difficult.
Absolutely. It's almost about building that education campaign internally so that you can go to each of the partners, because it is a partnership. Navigating this new landscape, you're going to have to rely on individuals. So partnering with your vendors to make sure that you learn from them. They're the experts in this area a lot of times. So learning from them, and then exactly how do you partner internally and communicate the risk if we don't make this move. Yes, we have another year now, but now that we're in a good place, if we are, or we have the time to build more, once we get there, we can start testing and learning, so that when we no longer have that choice, then we, again, are in a really good place because we have that learning behind us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the stories that has worked, or the pitches that has worked well for me in previous lives, has been, if you want to bring media costs down, this is a great tool in that effort of, having more of your own data. And like you were talking about lookalikes, but also being much more specific about what event are you trying to look alike around? Like, what is it that you're really building for? And so I think sometimes that has helped, if you can run a quick kind of proof of concept and show how, yes, you've learned more about your customer, but you've also helped bring down your media costs. And then I think internally for us, like you said, yes, education is critical. So, as we think about this role, as we're bringing it in, is just making sure that, retention, we have a team very focused on retention and kind of customer care, but just thinking about kind of that end-to-end data on a customer is, maybe newer for us. And so I think there is a lot of education. The benefit is you also, as a customer out in the world shopping and having, when you've had a great experience where you've shared a piece of data and you've gotten a great experience back. So I think sometimes we use those examples too, to just say, hey, we're all like humans living in the same decade. and
Yeah.
we know what a good experience is, and so that's the kind of experience we want to deliver, and here's the 6 things we've got to do in order to get there. So sometimes that helps because we can't always show it internally.
Yeah, and that customer lens is the customers always vote with their actions, right? They like that purposeful, personalized experience. Although the policies and the regulations are trying to help sort of navigate that for the consumer, advocacy for the consumer, but they really do like the personalized experience and the right message in the right format with the right relationship with the brand, find a much better, more loyal long-term customer. So it's sort of all pushing us to do all the right things for the consumer.
Speaking of right things for the consumer, one concern that has been shared with me as I've been writing about this topic over the years is whether new solutions that don't have cookies are just as privacy invasive as cookies, and I think we've seen some of this with some of the earlier solutions that came out. One thing I'm interested in, just as we're kind of talking about technology partners and evaluating your stack, is how you go about evaluating the processes that your partners use in order to get from A to B, and make sure that it's protecting user privacy just as much as it is protecting your revenue and it's an effective solution.
I love this question as a healthcare marketer because in healthcare, data privacy is key. So even if you're in SaaS, even if you're in e-commerce, if you find a vendor that is HIPAA compliant and is working within the regulations of healthcare, you can feel pretty confident that your privacy or your client privacy is being protected. So as we're looking at our different vendors, we're looking at, are they HIPAA compliant? That's going to be obviously number one. Do they have any certifications? While that's not, absolutely needed, if they're going through the rigor themselves to make sure that they have high trust certifications, things like that, it shows that they feel confident in the processes that they have and that they're going through the steps to validate that. And then again, leaning to the technology, making sure that the technologies that they are using are compliant as well. So making sure from start to end that we are being fully within the regulations that we have within healthcare. And again, that can then benefit other industries as well.
Yeah, I definitely see healthcare leading the way, and Dispatch in particular has great policies to share with vendors, right? Which is maybe not as prevalent in like a retail environment, but we can take cues from healthcare and regulated businesses because they put out standards and they put out paper and they put out policy. So as an organization, we prepared for years, being HIPAA, PCI, high trust compliant, and creating environments that allow us to handle PII and internal policies and procedures. So it's very easy to kind of speak to the most stringent of regulated industries. It also becomes an education part for other industries that maybe haven't matured, with their handling of data or understanding of compliance. So it becomes almost a roadmap for them. But yeah, it's top of mind, and I always, in terms of new potential vendors out there, there's so many potential choices, and pretty quickly when you bring in some of these certification requirements, that it kind of separates very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Even Google, like we have a lot of healthcare clients that have taken the opportunity to even remove Google, analytics, because based on new regulations, it's technically out of compliance. But using a CDP, you can kind of then decide what information you would pass to any of the third party partners that you'd use, and that's essential. It's going to be an essential part of the marketer's tool chest in the future. To control who gets exposed to what and what you're passing off, and it's only the necessary information, which then allows you to re-enable a lot of those publishers and partners that maybe don't have those same security standards, but they're not putting you at risk.
Mm-hmm. I think, Mike, you hit on too. One of the things we're getting into conversations about is, yeah, what is the downstream implication? Like, what are we handing off to some of those partners where it might be in more of a one-to-one scenario, or we've got this, is that, we were just having this
Yeah.
conversation a month ago about, oh, what is the information we actually need to pass off so that we get to like a good kind of very targeted, personalized experience versus what's all the other stuff we don't actually have to hand off.
Exactly.
And,
And that's
and
like
probably
now the common
shouldn't.
language, right? Well, what do we
Yeah.
don't
And
have
that, but if you don't stop and think about it or ask yourself, because you're like, but it's our data, it's held privacy, like, so it becomes this interesting thing that there's a rule, but then there's also kind of an integrity question for you yourself where you get to, then you're like, oh God, yeah, I got to be even more thoughtful about these things. If what I'm trying to do is, again, act on the best interest of my customer who's given me this first party data now. So yes, clean rooms and all those things, but also just like when you're even doing those kind of more one-to-one, what are you passing along? What are the attributes? And does Facebook need to know that about your customer?
Mhm.
Probably not. Like those are, I think, the interesting questions where was in some ways I think felt good that like, again, if you are being very thoughtful on behalf of your customer who's giving you that data, you do have a chance to kind of, make some changes.
Yeah. Yeah, this is all amazing, and I think it does point to though how complicated this issue is. And one quick follow up I had, and Mike, maybe this is one for you, but you talked about when you look at compliance and you slowly see the kind of cream rising to the top in terms of the partners that are available. Are you seeing as a consequence of this data strategy review and audience strategy review, there is a concentration of power into like a handful of large vendors? Are you seeing a diversification into partners that are more like channel oriented or capability oriented? Like how is this shaking up the kind of partner landscape, and will we see a lot of partners go away as a consequence of this?
Yeah, it's a great question because in many ways, like the media landscape is becoming even more fragmented, right? And I don't see that changing. I think I see that growing, right? More platforms, more partners, and the onus is more on you as the brand to kind of steward your data versus the next publishing platform that has a great programmatic offering. In terms of some of the tech and the martech that's around, you have like big players like Adobe. Um, their clients are going to be well served by their CDP offering that's coming out. So I think you'll see those same giants kind of foothold and evolve more to maintain their share, but there's going to be a lot of space for the more flexible, nimble, um, you know, type of organizations that kind of are not right within those giants. So I don't necessarily see any big changes. From our perspective, I kind of see the same sort of share of wallet, emerging until another dominant player comes along, in terms of the Martech space. But I think it's a little more of the same. It's a
Yeah.
mix of diversified smaller players with your usual, you know, uh, giants with a strong client engagement foothold. And they're all great, right? It's just some of them they're more enterprise, require more specialized skills internally, which restricts some of your hiring criteria. A little bit slower time to value, but more sort of enterprise versus quicker time to value with little lighter requirements in terms of hiring and staffing. So it's a little bit of a mix.
Yeah. I've got one final question on the technology stack, and then I'll get to some of the audience questions. But what I'm always curious about is where investment for these kind of big shifts is coming from. We talked about how this is complicated. It requires a lot of internal collaboration, but also, it requires a lot of time investment and monetary investment. So, do you think that this may lead to a retraction in marketing spend in the short term, as an example. Like I'm interested in how we can quantify like what the impact of this is going to be in the short and long term.
Yeah, I could maybe take that, and curious to get everybody's perspective. But I people are they're right now, marketers, organizations are making space for these types of investments. Where that money comes from, is it incremental? Is it coming from the technology side, like core IT, or is it coming out of marketing? It's really a mixed bag. I do see a little bit more of it coming out of technology, um, which is interesting, than maybe before. In terms of will it pull back on the spending, we've not seen that. We've actually seen a little bit more of an acceleration of spending when people have moved off of those sort of cookie-based tactics and moved to more of a audience-centric sort of solution. And I think they're just more efficient in terms of some of the buying that's going on. So I see more expansion, um, but a little bit less of these large single tactics, right? So um, so I'd say in general, it's been a little more incremental, but there is some that's coming out of the total marketing addressable dollars for sure in the clients that we see and interact with, and some of my peer agencies I talk to. It's making that space of 10 to 15% of what they didn't account for last year to fund these initiatives.
So last
Yeah,
year,
I think. Go ahead, Lauren.
thank you. So last year we did carve out some of our marketing budget in order to start funding our CDP and standing that up. So that was an investment that we planned for, but it is definitely something that we do need those partnerships for. Even though we helped fund it, again, we do need to form those partnerships with our tech team as we look to stand it up. But I think overall, at least from what we're seeing, so with our space, there is a decrease in marketing spend or budget year over year. So to me, that really highlights the need for these solutions so that we can make sure that the targeting that we have is in place and that we do get the attribution that we need so that we can go back to advocate for, hey, next year, let's at least have a steady budget, if not more budget.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I think similar threading of the needle in the sense of looking at media, where can we tighten that, or where can we kind of quarter by quarter just find new ways to be more effective, efficient. Certainly also with our current MarTech stack, I think, back to the point of utilization, just like really when we have the chance to renegotiate, I think we are pretty aggressively. And then I think a lot of it is also, funding tools, but also funding people. And so I think that's the other piece that we're really trying to make sure that we're prioritizing is how do you get, because the tools are only so good as the people to use them. And again, we're, if we were a digital native company, we might be having a very different answer on this. But given that, we're not, I think that is sometimes you want to invest in tools or IT, Salesforce offers a lot of promises, but I think we all know if you don't have the people to get the most out of it. So I'd say we're kind of renegotiating on both media and MarTech side. And then, kind of quarter by quarter, trying to find where those opportunities are, where we can continue to invest in personalization, et cetera, and staffing.
Let's stay on that. Oh, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, I should preference that, like, most of the budgets that we're working with are like lower funnel, right? So there, can be money that's, I believe it's coming maybe a little bit more from a brand and sort of nice to have activations, right? Where that's something that's self-funding some of this. And also to your point, it's the whole enablement piece. It's how do you got to fund the tech, but then I think there is an underestimation of what is it going to take to actually put this, in market, and that's where we kind of see that there's some challenges across different clients. It's okay, now we actually need more people, or we need to go outside. We need someone to support this. So it's really a cost plus model, and the plus part is maybe not planned for as much as the cost piece in general. So whatever you
So
think it is.
yeah, on that, what I'm interested in is when you're thinking about workforce design and how you design your business in order to better enable, as you say, the technology that you have and to better leverage the data that you have. What other skills gaps that you're identifying? Are you designing like new roles of departments? Are you shedding some existing ones? Like, what is that looking like when you're doing that work internally? Kat, I'm interested in your perspective.
Yeah, I think for us, unlike let's say the budget, the dollars for tools, we are thinking of those roles as incremental. Again, that may be unique to us given our history, but we're looking at them as incremental. Again, we have, like I said, we have a strong customer care and retention team, but we're really trying to think about kind of that end-to-end journey. And so those roles are new. And then I think also what we're trying to do is really figure out how do we collaborate. This is, story old as time for anybody that's ever worked in an office, maybe any job. But how do we really collaborate? Because a lot of it is some of those ideas, or again, the value exchange, like what is the data is like sitting in pockets between, phone, field, and then I would say digital in our world here at AVT. And so I think we're trying to figure out what skills do we have that maybe have been doing a piece of it, and how do we bring them together in kind of a, I think what do people call them? Tiger teams, a tiny but mighty team that's got to go kind of solve it for the org and show quick change. But I think, if we don't staff it, like we're hiring 2 this year, but I think the goal is we get our feet under us and we show some progress. And then next year we need to really, like, it can't just be 2 people figuring it out. And not that it is today, but like, in terms of really staffing up so that we can see the full benefit of it.
Yeah, I'd say in terms of on an agency side, we definitely increased our staff and support to support external enablement, probably at a higher rate than we anticipated 2 years ago. So it's because it's this concept that we call it the final mile. It's you got to be able to help your partners with that final mile, to get that enablement over the hump. So I'd say that's been something a little bit like not anticipated as much that we had to. And the other thing that I see really between the agency and the client is just a reemergence of having to have someone extremely capable and competent in ad ops in general. Ad ops is not an easy sort of process, and I think for years it's just sort of taken for granted. It's we're dropping a pixel in a container, and it's much more involved today, particularly when you start operating in a more privacy safe manner with external publishers. Really, the emergence of good quality ad ops talent is hard to find right now in the market. So we've definitely beefed that up and provide that for clients, but it's starting to become a defined role. If it wasn't, like, you would see that maybe in publisher clients, but not in a multi-location retail client. Like, somebody is now sort of squarely solely responsible for ad ops with the team.
Perfect. We've covered loads of ground and it's been amazing. I do want to get to some of the questions that we've had before we have to wrap, because we are fast approaching deadline. One of them is, how are you doing source attribution with first-party data, and can you run different attribution models with first-party?
Yeah. So the great question. So we're doing a lot of attribution using sort of exposure logs, right, for all aspects of performance digital. So for programmatic, for meta, it's been really, really powerful and meaningful to provide attribution based on the customer files and the exposure. And that's been kind of cornerstone to the whole strategy. So, and the clients and other agencies that are doing that are getting a lot of success out of that. The idea of solving like a multi-touch attribution is really not the direction so much as understanding what is the incrementality of the mix and what has been the contribution to my customer acquisition with all the media that they're exposed to, and coming up with really good insights around, how much should someone be exposed? At what point are we oversaturating? I think that's where we're finding a lot more value than trying to create a fractional share of attribution across different channels. It's more of audience to performance, is the way I would kind of answer that question.
Yeah, I'd say we're very keen right now on getting our media mix model updated, to your point of just like making sure that's current, and that we have, a good sense of kind of our hold up markets in the right place. Like what's all the logic behind it, and how often should we be refreshing it? And so I think that, because we're also, when we think about it, it's phone, and both phone and e-com are really critical, and phone can get, a little bit different sometimes in terms of attribution. We also do direct mail. So I think we're media mix is kind of, like you said, those, QR codes and media mix models, like everything gets its day in the sun again. So
Exactly. I say it all the time. It's funny starting a digital company, almost 20 years ago, and we were lucky enough to merge with a direct marketing organization, and kind of saw this coming, because really where we are is a lot of core direct marketing principles being applied to digital. So it's stay in the sun is a great way. It's getting its day in the sun again. It's nothing new. It's a little old, but it's new to a lot of people, that are navigating that water. And that is been really what's been driving a lot of success. It's like applying those principles, your holdouts, your media mix, right, models, your incrementality testing is definitely been the way to go, than to chase a multi, multi-touch attribution. Perfection is just flawed.
Going back to the basics, because if you look at the different attribution models, first touch, last touch, W, you can really tell whatever story you want. But if we go back to the basics and build that media mix model, whatever that is, that's what's going to really help us as marketers understand what's truly going on, so that we can build those strategies moving forward.
And then you're focused on, the who are we targeting, and what kind of message are we, all the fun parts, right, that we need to keep front and center, right? The creative really matters. The message matters, particularly when you get that fundamental understanding of the audience. But I couldn't agree more.
I'll very quickly ask this question, but I wonder if it's one more for a comms audience. But anyway, if you have a point of view, share it. If not, we'll wrap up. What impact, if any, will cookie deprecation have on your organization's approach to crisis or reputation management?
Thinking through that one.
I know. Me too. I don't have a.
Yeah, that's a.
I guess if we're using that cookie to kind of identify sort of bad site experiences, maybe, I don't know, anybody want to take that one?
I don't know. Sounds like somebody's got to solve that. I don't have a quick response on that one.
Maybe the person with the question has a great answer for us.
That's right.
Yeah.
Webinar, but have not been broached that subject. Great question.
Yeah, I don't think it would change for us our kind of standard approach to crisis comms.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And maybe that's another webinar that we need to hold. But for now, that's all we have time for. I really appreciate the audience for participating. Thank you for the questions. It's always really great to hear what is top of mind for you. Of course, thank you to our amazing speakers. This has been a phenomenal hour. We've covered a lot of ground. And thank you to our sponsor, Amsive, for making this event possible. Be sure to check out our continued coverage of cookie deprecation on campaignlive.com. And yeah, if you have any other ideas, please reach out. We're always open. So yeah, thank you for joining. I hope that there was plenty of insights for you today, and have a lovely rest of your day.
Bye all.
Thanks,
Thank
Jessica.
you.